Hello, welcome back to I Got Board Game. Back to record a review for you this Friday. So nice, it's the weekend. I am Ben.
I'm John, and I'm back.
And he's back. And today we will be reviewing a kind of light fantasy gateway game. So a game that helps people get into the hobby. And that game is
The light fantasy Golem
Edition. Oh gosh, that was good. That was good. We will be reviewing
Century Golem Edition.
So for those of you who don't know, people who are maybe new to fantasy stuff, a golem is basically like a animated stone creature, if you will. Usually stone, could be different things in different fantasy worlds. And so that's basically the theme in this game. You are in this kind of fantasy world as merchants, this world that has these golems that you're also trying to collect and kind of trade to get the right golems and get the most points that way. So Century plays 2 to 5 players. Box says 30 to 45 minutes, which sounds about right. And so before we get into talking more about it, we will do a quick run through of the rules. And so you have an idea of how it plays. So let me switch over to a picture of the game set up. And so this game is set up for 3 players in this picture. And part of the setup is this deck of cards up here, which is the point cards or the golem cards. And so they're the cards that will be flipped over, 5 in the row at all times. And that's basically the cards you want to buy to have the points written on them. And then the stack of cards in row under it are the merchant cards, which are essentially action cards in this game. Because in this game, you're going to be taking 1 action on your turn, and you have 4 options. And so those 4 options are, 1, you can buy one of these merchant cards by basically paying, or is it the cost? No, sorry.
Pick it up.
Take it. Yeah, you just take it for free. But if you want to get one that is more toward the right, you have to give up one of your crystals and place it on the cards that you're skipping over to the card that you actually want to take. And that's kind of like a cost to get cards that are more inside this row. And so after you take that card, then you just slide the cards to the left and refill on the right with a new card from the deck. So that's how that row will keep cycling. Maybe certain cards will get more crystals on them. And so then if a player later on chooses to take one of these merchant cards on their turn, they'll also get the crystals on the cards. And so I mentioned the crystals, and I'll kind of just explain those right now. The crystals are basically the currency in the game. 4 different levels of crystals, which actually the order of the colors matters because they can be upgraded to the next level up, the next color up, with yellow being the lowest. And I believe this is the right order here.
It goes yellow to green to sapphire to turquoise. Amethyst.
And so then when you do collect crystals, your currency, you'll be putting it on your caravan card, which each player has in front of them. And so you have a limit of 10 crystals at any time. If you ever get more than that, you have to choose which ones to discard. So anyway, getting back to the actions, one of your actions you can do on your turn is acquiring one of these merchant cards, these action cards. The other option you have is to play a merchant card you have in your hand, because every player starts with 2 merchant cards, and obviously as you acquire them, you gain that card that you can play as an action on your turn. And so the cards themselves then have 3 possible different actions. So these 2 starter cards here, you can see one of them is a card that basically just gets you the crystals shown in the top left of the card. So if on your turn you play that card as your action, this player would just take 2 yellow crystals from the supply, add it to their caravan. This icon up here with the gray crystals and the up arrow means you can upgrade twice. So that means you could take a crystal you have in your caravan already and upgrade it 2 colors up, or choose, in this case, 2 different crystals you have in your caravan and upgrade them both once. So that's what this icon means on this card here. It's just you get 2 upgrades, and you can split it up however you want on the crystals you have. The third option you have on your turn is to rest, because at some point you're going to be playing your cards as your turn comes by, and each card then when you play it, it stays on the table, so you don't get to keep playing it. It stays on the table face up, but then at some point, if you want to use the cards again, you have to rest in order to pick up all those cards you played previously back into your hand to have them available in a future turn again. And then the last option you have is you can buy one of the point cards, one of the golem cards. And so to buy them, you have to put back into the supply the specific crystals that are listed on the golem card itself. And so you can see them at the bottom card. This one needs 4 greens. This one needs 5 greens. And they'll give you 8 points or 10 points. A little special rule is that the card that's in the farthest left column has these copper tokens above it. So whenever someone buys the leftmost card, leftmost golem, they'll also get a copper token, which is worth 3 points at the end of the game, 3 bonus points. And so if someone were to buy one of these golems similar to the merchant cards, you'll slide all the golems to the left again and then refill on the right with a new golem card. As you can see here too, the second most left spot has these silver tokens above it. So if someone chooses to buy the second card here, they'll also get a silver token, which is worth 1 bonus point. And so there's no order you have to buy these in. It's more just what you can have, what crystals you have available to buy which golems, and so you can go for it that way. And so players will go clockwise, taking 1 action per turn in this way until one player has bought 5 point cards, or 6 if there's fewer players. And then you'll finish off that round, so everyone has the same number of turns. And then you'll count up your points that are on your golem cards, plus your tokens if you got any. And the person with the most points is the winner. And I believe the tie break is the person who has the most crystals still left in their caravan, if it comes to a tiebreaker. And so that's how you play the game.
Also, for points, is non-yellow crystals also count as points as well.
Ah, that's right. Each one is also worth 1 point. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and the tie, actually, just reading the rule book real quick, is the last player to take a turn wins. So the later player actually is the one that wins.
Oh.
Which reminds me of a little bit of Splendor style, or a way of breaking ties from a Splendor standpoint of, we've talked about it, right? Players who go first tend to have advantages. So I think
okay,
that is a similar concept.
That is a good point. Because I know in Splendor it was just who has the fewest cards.
Most points and fewest.
Yeah. Or like, the points tied, then the person with the fewest cards. But in this one, okay, the last person who bought
to take a turn. Yep.
Oh, to take a turn, or
to take a turn. So it's based on the turn order.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's much more clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, going into the pros, what we like about this game. We'll start with you, John.
Yeah, so it's a fun game. It's very simple, as we were explaining the rules. Like, even though it might have felt like it took a bit of time to explain, that's really all there is to the game. There's nothing more deep or complex in that sense of turn actions. It's 1 action a turn, so it's very, like, it's pretty clear, like, you can only do one of those things. So in a way, it helps streamline the simplicity of making these decisions. Now, on that vein, though, this game is actually pretty strategically complex in the sense of it does take kind of a bit of thinking to actually figure out what you want to do with your turn because you're limited to one action a turn. And I think the clever and unique thing about this game is the way that the acquiring cards comes through, as well as when you're playing cards. So I'll talk about the acquiring first. So in most standard games, right, when you're trying to acquire cards, especially for the style of game, it's not quite a deck builder, right? Because this isn't really a deck building game, nor is it a tableau building game either. Because in those games, typically the cards will always be in front of you or like in a deck that you kind of cycle through regularly. But in this case, it really is picking up this action card or this merchant card to do your action, which we didn't explain what those different actions are, but there are 3 different types of cards, or 2 different.
Sorry.
There are 3 different types of cards.
Yeah, I only explained 2, right?
Yeah, we
and
explained
the last
2.
kind, and let me actually pull up a different image. Sorry to.
Yeah, no,
I
all good.
forgot about that.
All good.
So this other image is actually with the game's official play mat. So it actually has the spots to put everything in. Yeah. But yeah, so the last kind of action John's getting at is there's this type up here where you'll see these gems, certain colored gems, and an arrow down to other gems. Yeah. And so this is considered a trade card, where when you play this card as an action, you get to trade, in this case, 2 blues for a pink, green, and 2 yellows. But then also that same turn that you're playing this card to trade, you can actually trade multiple times if you have the gems to do so. So if you had 4 blues, you could actually do this trade twice and end up with 2 pink, 2 green, 4 yellow. So yeah, that's the third type of action card, merchant card.
And so this is where the game really kind of picks up, because it's how you manipulate your turns and how you're playing your cards that kind of help you get your resources, right? So I think as you're showing, everyone starts off with the same basic cards to gain resources, which is I think 2 yellows, which is the lowest level, and then that upgrade card that can just make a crystal 1 level higher twice, up to 2 times, right? But this is where, with all these merchant cards, and there's different types, there's some that allow you to get more crystals, like you can see, I think, in the middle of the screenshot that Ben is sharing right now, where you can just pick up a green and a yellow, or you do the trading, right? But that's the important thing about the game is when you play these cards, as we were mentioning, you get to only play it once until you take an entire turn to rest, right? So you have to take an entire action to then pick up all the cards again. So it's one of those games, this is one of those interesting games where it's like you're trying to be as efficient as possible with your actions, but the way that you get your resources is all about the types of cards that you pick up over time in terms of the way that you want to trade, right? And yeah, like it's all based on kind of cards that you pick up over time, right? So because once you pick up this merchant card, it's yours to keep. You always have that merchant card. That means you always have that capacity to do that trade. But also noting that when you play it, it'll only be once until you have to rest again, which takes an entire turn for somebody else or other groups of people to do something separately.
Yeah, so to expand on what you were also mentioning about the trading cards basically being kind of the main way that you're building up in the game. That is the kind of card that really adds to the rhythm and what you're trying to do in the game, trading crystals for the right crystals to buy the golems you want. And so you can see here, like if a player were to pick up this card on their turn and then next turn somehow pick up this one, you can see that on one turn they could play this to get a green and a yellow. On another turn, play this card to trade those green and yellow for a pink, right? So that's kind of how you're, in a sense, with the cards, these action cards you're taking, building up your own system of trading in ideally the most efficient way to end up with what you need to get the golems. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's, I think, what you were getting at, right? That's really where the game lies, with the trading the right things, getting the right action cards to do that, and then the pacing of that. Yeah. Right? It's finding this rhythm with the cards you're picking up, setting yourself up with, so that in a sense you can be more efficient, in your trading and getting the right gems than your opponents,
Mhm.
but then also trying to be at a different pace than them, so that you're not always like at the same pace, getting same gems, trying to buy the same golems as another player every single time.
And in terms of buying the golems, I think that's another strong strength of this game, is that even though there's these different crystals and that there's a different level to each of these crystals, as you can see with the point cards, the golem cards, it's also really important, or it's really interesting about the fact that just because you may have an engine that you're building or like an efficiency in your actions that you're taking, it's maybe not always the best thing to only be trying to get to like the highest level crystals, right? Because, for example, if you're looking at the tableau here right now, there's actually very few of these cards that are the magenta pink colored crystals. So if you were to start picking up the action cards that only get you the magenta colored crystals, yeah, it's great that you have a bunch of them, but you're not really going to be able to buy the golems that are actually available for pickup, right?
Mm.
So I think that's also something that's really interesting or unique about this game too, is you need to build your engine with enough variety for you to pick up different types of crystals over time, because you're going to need to get the right crystals to buy these golems on the tableau.
And I think some of the small things I would want to point out is the rules I mentioned about these copper and silver tokens. I think that's a nice small change, right? Because it gives a reason to maybe get the golem cards that get pushed out to the left here, even if there are fewer points, you know? And so it just gives you a little bit more to think about. It's like, okay, am I always just going to be eyeing the ones over here that are worth maybe slightly more points currently? Or, oh, but if I get this 11 plus a 3, that's actually already more than this golem here, which actually costs numerically more crystals, right? One extra crystal. And so that's a nice little design choice to just include that for these two columns here. But then also, I think the main thing that comes to mind, if it wasn't clear in the rules that we explained, getting these action cards are free, except if you want ones that are toward the right, then you have to leave any gem, but one gem per card you're skipping.
Yep.
But that's interesting because it's a very different feel from a game like Splendor then, which is, seemingly also a game of getting the gems, if you will, to buy the things you want, right? Where in that one, in Splendor, you're getting the tokens in a certain way, the gem tokens, spending them to buy the cards, and those cards build up your engine where it provides you with the gem and maybe points. Where in this case, I see it kind of split up into two different steps, right? Where you get your actions and cards for free, essentially, but then you have to eventually use them in a certain pacing to get the gems to buy your points. And so it's just an interesting thing to notice that actually does set it apart a lot from Splendor.
Yes.
For those of you who might think it'll just feel the same as Splendor.
Yeah, and one thing that I think we're kind of skating around, but basically when you're placing the crystals to pick up the later cards, basically what that is doing is you're putting those resources on those cards, and any other player who decides to pick up that particular card will be able to get that crystal that's sitting on that card, right? So for example, in the screenshot here, if I were to get let's say I was going to get the third card, so I would place a crystal on the first and the second card, each one, and then let's say it's Ben's turn. If he wanted to pick up the far left card, when he picks it up, he just basically gets that crystal that I put on for free. So it's another way of acquiring crystals outside of the actions, depending on what other players are doing. So there is this trade that happens for, right, basically someone saying, I want to get this action ahead of time from other players because it may fit my style or may fit my, what I want to do as a merchant kind of in this world more, but I'm kind of paying for it to get that action or to kind of get that action ahead of my other competitors, but it costs me, or I have to pay it out for the others to potentially take a benefit out of. Of course, you could also maybe do that action and then in a subsequent turn, pick up the card that you had put a crystal on to get it back. But again, you're still at the mercy of maybe another player picking it up from there. So it gives a little bit also of that, while it's a free action or while it's free to pick up, it really is only free on the far left, which means if there's something that you're really looking to do, you have to consider, is it worth the sacrifice of the crystals that I am giving? Or maybe it's a better option for me to rest. But then if that card is critical for your merchant activities, right, or your strategy in the game, you have to kind of figure out, is that worth the investment or not, kind of thing. So very
and
fast.
if you think someone's going to take it before it gets back to you, so that's kind of the little bit of mind game, indirect player interaction that you have to think about because you're only taking the one action per turn.
Exactly.
And so aside from that, I do also want to point out that the production of the game I like a lot. I mean, a key piece of background for this game that we didn't mention yet, but we'll mention here and toward the end, is this is actually called Golem Edition because the original version was called Century Spice Road. And so that's maybe what you would actually come across more readily if you're looking for this game.
In retail,
it's called Century Spice Road, which is then a more of a, I mean, not to be stereotypical, but like Middle Eastern out there kind of caravan trading spices theme. That's literally the theme. So don't get on me about it. But that is kind of the more stereotypical theme in the board game world, right? Trading in the Mediterranean or those kind of things. And so, but that is the original theme, and the components are slightly different in that one. But then I think the background is that fans were kind of wanting a different version, or maybe specifically heard something about possibility of a Golem edition. And so fans actually wanted this different edition. And so that's when they started producing this different version, but it plays exactly the same. So it's kind of up to you which theme you like. But as a pro, I like this theme more, this kind of fantasy world theme that involves golems in a certain way. And so then other things about the production, though, are that aside from the playmat here, the cards, the tokens, the crystals, and the trays, that's all what comes with the game. Like, these trays are nice, right? They're like crystal shaped to match the theme. They fit in the box pretty well. Let me see if I can show my box. But it has a nice insert that fits everything well. Hold on. There we go. And so this is all four of those trays in this shape, and it has one cover for it all too. So it's really nicely stored. And then the cards themselves are, I believe, these are tarot-sized cards.
I think so, yeah.
And so if you can tell relative to my hand, they are big cards. And so they feel nice in that way, since, everyone's used to kind of standard sized cards, but to have them bigger, you get to have nicer, bigger artwork on them. And they kind of fill up the space on the table well, so it's easier to see. And so I like how they're tarot cards. But then one last thing I was also sharing with John before this is I remember when Golem Edition was announced, something that the designer was pointing out that's different from the original is if you look at the merchant cards themselves, they have very nice artwork. But then aside from just having the icons up here and a generic piece of artwork, the artwork on here actually shows the gems involved in the action. So this is trading 1 pink for 3 green. So you have the pink here, 3 green there. And so I thought that was a really cool touch. It just kind of uses the artwork to also indicate the action, right? And I mean, you're not necessarily going to look at the artwork first to be like what the action is, but it's nice that they went to that extent to just include that in all the cards. Whereas I think in Century Spice Road, it would just be it would still be the nice artwork, but still just repeated artwork on different trade cards.
And as
And
the background that I have here, as well as I think Ben was alluding to, is the fact that we believe that all of the artwork of each of these golems is distinct and unique. None of them are repetitive in that sense. Maybe with the merchant cards, it might be somewhat in terms of like maybe it's a similar scene, but with different gems. But all of the golem artwork is different from each other. So
yeah, which is nice
unique.
because in the original, it would be the point cards would have repeats. So all different golems, which is really cool. Again, putting the effort in to do that. And the tokens are, I believe, metal. They're really light though, but you can hear the clanking.
Maybe like an aluminum compound or something.
Yeah, so yeah, they are
sounds science-y.
Nice metal tokens though, engraved with the Century logo, the C on it. So yeah, nice production, good gateway game. And so now going into the cons, what we don't like about the game.
So I'll say for being a gateway style game or a game that's supposed to be simple, ironically, a con to this game is the fact that sometimes the turns can feel like they take a long time, even though it's only one action a turn. The reason why is because what people will do is they'll spend a lot of time thinking about the way that they need to do the turns or their actions in order to try to do what they want to do. And that does take a lot of processing time for a person to think about because, as we were saying, the way that people pick up cards or they buy things on the tableau will change, right, what might happen from a planning standpoint. And because this game is so central about how you plan your actions accordingly, there can be a lot of hold up in the game for something that should be pretty simple to play through. And this is coming from somebody who loves to overthink his turns personally, that it really does sometimes feel like the game gets really held up by maybe one or two players if they're really just taking their time to process. It can slow down this game in a way that doesn't feel, it just feels elongated for kind of no reason, right? Especially when it's not your turn. So I'll leave it at that and see what makes
No, yeah, I do get what you're saying with that. For me, I would actually go a little more into the strategy of the game. Like from when we were talking about it, it was interesting. I mean, for me to remember the experience of then, setting up the right cards and kind of building your own cycle that you'll be repeating to do your own pacing at getting the crystals and golems you want. But then at the same time, what ends up happening a lot when people are strategizing, or I mean, it's a competitive game, is they end up building up to a point where they can try to get, or they have enough crystals to get certain golems that they also see other people are building up to.
Yeah.
And so then they kind of build up faster in some way, and then they kind of wait there to see what the other people are going to do. Kind of basically like being this like cutoff point, right? Of like, oh, I can kind of just take whatever you want from right under you, which I don't have an issue against, but it's more just that it seems like the strategies always end up leading to that point, right? Trying to cover your bases as much as you can to then keep someone else out. And then you're just kind of waiting and hoping they make the lesser choice. And then you're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to scoop in and get the good one then. So I don't know, it just kind of, that's the part that can end up feeling a little stale, that it ends up always feeling that way, people making that kind of choice with their strategy.
And to that point as well, I would say that it kind of, I think we mentioned it a little bit earlier about Splendor, is there does seem to be this advantage feel, like it's a similar criticism we had with that game, is it seems like the players who go before or first in the turn order usually have an opportunity to do exactly what Ben was saying, where it's rather than people being able to openly kind of thrive in varying strategies, which you would kind of expect as merchants, is like, oh, you can kind of build your own style of how you go out gathering materials or doing more trading or doing an upgrade, maybe more of a focus on upgrading, it tends to become more of a, I'm going to see what everybody else is building, because I can see, like, you can see other players, what they're gathering, what kinds of cards they've picked, or what kind of crystals they've picked up, and even the cards that they play out. Once they play the cards, it's out there. And then you can kind of guess what their strategy is, which then becomes more of a, can I both get points and block you at the same time? Which, as you were saying, it's not necessarily a bad thing for that to happen in a game, but it kind of, with the single actions per turn in this game, it does feel a little bit more stilting than other games that have similar mechanics, where you can usually recover in another game, but in this game, sometimes it can be really crippling to the point where you can't buy anything at some point, right, on the tableau. So a little bit of that is not great. So, or the feeling when that happens, it doesn't feel as good in some other games.
Yeah, I mean, I think what comes to mind is even in Splendor, it feels like you might be able to sidestep a little more easily, because that's like an engine building game, like you'll have other cards that provide other gems. So it's like, okay, I couldn't get the one I wanted, but it's not too hard to build up to this other one.
Yeah, I can collect more gems, or I can buy a separate card that maybe wasn't as efficient or as much that I wanted, but I could still get it. In this game, the only points are those cards. And if someone buys the very gems that you wanted, if none of the other cards in the tableau fit that gem pattern that you have, you're completely stuck at that point, and you have to find new cards at that point. So
yeah, and there is those rare cases too where it's like no one wants the action cards that are out there, but your own system isn't built up yet either, so everyone's just kind of dragging out the game in a way, because like someone's got to take the action card so we can refill a new one, but none of us want these to waste our turn filling our hand with a card where you don't even want. So that's a little unusual case where the game can also kind of drag on a bit when it just when the action cards work out that way. But with that, we will go on to our rating.
What if I have so many more things that I don't like about it? Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Rating, and John guesses the weight. Wait. So rating and weight, starting with John.
So rating wise, I would probably give this game a 7.5. I think mainly my criticism about the turn stilting, the surprisingly long feel for what should be a very simple game, I think drops it down from what I would probably make an 8. But this is a game that I would definitely want to play again. It has been a long time, so I think it would be fun to pick this up again, and I'm considering maybe I'll tell my siblings about it, to be like, since we have some game nights, and I'll be like, hey, let's play this, because this is a great game. But yeah, I would probably give this a 7.5 out of 10 for my rating. And then weight-wise, I'm really rusty with weight, but I'm going to say a 1.91 for this game.
Okay, so we're going to go over to Board Game Geek to show my rating and John's
guessing
prediction on the weight, if he's correct or not.
I hope I get this.
So going to BGG, I actually gave the game an 8. And the weight is 1.63. Lighter.
Ben likes this game because he knows he'll never need to give me a game.
Lighter than you think. So I gave this an 8, and actually was just looking at it right before you were sharing your 7.5. I was like, should I give it 7.5? Because I do kind of lean towards that, but then I also looked at my Splendor score, which was 8.5. And so then in that case, I do think 8 is fitting, kind of relative scoring, because I do enjoy Splendor more, but this is close up there. I would say this kind of, again, it's not a Splendor game, but something that happens a lot in the board game industry is, there's certain games that are like landmark or kind of very defining, and they become kind of the point of comparison for a lot of games, even becoming a category of games on its own, a pseudo category. And that kind of happened with Splendor. Again, we're mentioning Splendor a lot. You can check our review on that. I will hopefully remember to include it in the description if you want to go over to that game. But it's important because in comparing it to Splendor, because Splendor was one that was that point of comparison when it came out in the industry. And so there were a lot of these gateway games that came afterward that people would, in a sense, market as like, oh yeah, this is like a new Splendor. And it's not saying that it plays the same at all even, or has the same theme, but it has that kind of feel where it's a game that looks really nice, probably has very nice feeling components, but then is also a game that is easy to pick up and ultimately not that thematic. It can look thematic and give you a little description, but when you're playing, you don't actually really feel the theme. And so that's kind of the pseudo category that Splendor established. And Century was one of those games that people described as a new Splendor. And so, and I do see that, but then I don't think it's as good as Splendor. So the 8. And I think even, I don't know if I rated the original Century Spice Road.
Why don't you click on it and see?
Let's see. I don't know if because I think I got rid of my Century Spice Road to keep Golem Edition because I didn't need 2 of the same game. Let's see. Century Spice Road, 7.5. Oh, I did it. Oh man, look how consistent I am in my thinking. So the reason why I wanted to show this is because I do think Golem is just a little bit better than the original because of kind of the theme I mentioned that I like more, even if it's just the artwork and the little design production details of, varied card art basically. It's a nice extra touch they're willing to do, which I think makes it just a little better than the original.
Hey, you look at the complexity of the weight rating between Spice Road and this game. It's literally the same game, and they have a different weight.
Yeah, that's
weight is relative. Weight is relative.
Yeah, that doesn't make you just sore loser.
I want a free copy.
But then the other thing I do want to mention, if you guys do find this game interesting, appealing from what we've been saying, something cool to know about this game and the designer Emerson Matsuuchi, who has done great games over the years, is specifically for Century Spice Road and then Century Golem Edition coming after it. His original plan was actually to make Century Spice Road and then basically 2 sequel games. And so those 2 sequel games would be in the same world as Century Spice Road, but focus on different mechanics. Like I believe the second one, and I think I pulled it up here. Let me see if I can go over to it. Well, here, Eastern Wonders is the second game he had in mind for that series. And then A New World, which is actually not too old, I think. Yeah, just last year.
2019.
And so these sequel games, like I mentioned, I think his idea was to have them focus on different mechanics in board gaming. And not a lot of mechanics, mainly just on one new mechanic. And I think Eastern Wonders was, it introduced, I think, was it pick up and deliver as a mechanic to how Century plays. Still this kind of trading game, but now centered more around pick up and deliver. And then I think the third one might introduce, was it worker placement? Yeah, worker placement, which we kind of talked about before with like viticulture. And then the other interesting idea with this series of games, right, because it is all in the same world coming after each other, is depending on which ones you have, there's also rules included to combine the games. So you can combine the original Century Spice Road with its version of Eastern Wonders, and it has a different way of playing with all those mechanics together, which sounded really novel and ambitious, because at the end he'll have a third game release and all 3 of them can play together with certain rules.
Extremely ambitious.
Yeah, which is cool. And I heard from other reviews that certain combinations work better than others, but it is something that actually works. And then with Golem Edition, then those other 2 games that come after are also being produced. So there's Century Golem that we've been talking about, the base one, and then Eastern Wonders, which is the Golem Edition version to introduce pick up and deliver, and an Endless World, which is supposed to introduce the worker placement. And so these two versions literally are just re-implementations of the two that come after Century Spice Road. So it's cool that he still also continued that for the Golem Edition, because that was a concern for some of the fans of like, yeah, we got the Golem Edition. Oh, but original Century is going to have expansions. Is this one going to have expansions /
Golem
sequels?
Edition, yep.
And they did it. So that was really, really cool to see them do.
Nice.
So yeah. And so with that, that is our review of Century Golem Edition. 7.5 from John, 8 from me. And if you found this helpful, please share this review with friends, family, people you want to play board games with. Hope you get to check out the game. And until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.